Nero, can you see my screen?
Yes, please. I can see your screen and the recording is started already.
Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone. So, apologies that we couldn't have this yesterday. Some difficulties, but it's all good. Right, let's start. Okay, so today we are going to look into networking. We're going to look at networking in Azure, what it is, right? I know we touched a little bit about in 104, in 900, but we're going to get a little bit more deep actually. So, what we're going to look today is administer virtual network. Let me kickstart this. Kickstarting this. Well, what we're going to look at again. This is AZ104. What is AZ104 talking about? Configure, complain, configure. So the things we're going to look at is like how to configure virtual network. What is how to configure virtual network security groups? How to host your domain on Azure DNS. Look at implementing virtual networks. There's a lab on that which I'm going to run through on the screen for us. Starting virtual networks. The objective say, hey, plan virtual networks, create create subnets, plan IP addressing, create public IPs, associate public IP addresses, associate or assign private IP addresses, demonstration virtual networks. Then we're going to have a recap. As just as we have always been doing, trying to tell you how deep this goes into your AZ 104 exams. This basically contains likely going to 50 to 20 percent of your questions, right? Questions is going to around how do you configure public IP addresses, the types and SKUs of public IP addresses, how do you configure subnets, right? I'm going to try to go through all this. How to plan virtual network, how to plan virtual networks. So planning virtual network is very important. The way I would like to start this is saying, okay, hey, a virtual network basically, a virtual network is basically like a virtual network is like a switch. Someone asked me what a switch. A switch is basically a place whereby you have multiple devices connect to in your environment. So in that sense, a virtual network, basically a virtual network is like your switch, is like a switch in Azure. That's where that place you plug your various resources. If I can give an example, I have a router here that I can also serve as a switch, and I can say example, just my example, not so like for like example, but this is an example of a virtual network, right? This is what it is like. You are going when you're creating, although it's not physical, right? But when you create it in Azure, this is basically what you're creating. You're creating a situation whereby you have different ports. So when you see something like this, you're creating a VM. One VM plugs to this, the second VM plugs to this. Let's say VM virtual machine. You create an app service. The app service needs, if your app service is going to be private, that means it's going to plug to this. So, and this basically is what we call a network interface card. That means it's a network. A network needs to be plugged in it. So, what is this all about? Just to summarize it, this is all about what what this is all about. This is basically how you connect. This is basically how you connect to Azure Backbone, right? This is how you connect. So for that, whenever you hear networking, think about okay, two or more devices need to communicate with each other. There's some resources you can create in Azure without having a virtual network, but it's impossible to create some resources without a virtual network. Example, like a VM. If you try to create a VM must exist in a virtual network, right? So the thing when you say planning virtual networks, there need to be a set of plan. So, for example, if in my environment now I'm setting up a new landing zone, what is a landing zone? Landing zone, let's say a landing zone means like an entire subscription, an entire region of setup whereby I need to connect to many things. For example, let me say Helen is here. Let me Helen organization reach out to me and say, hey, so we're planning to move to Azure. As we're planning to move to Azure, we need to connect several of our resources to Azure. So part of the things I would do for Helen will say, okay, hey, in the Azure environment, I need to set up. So look at this. Look at this for example now. There's on-premise. Look at the screen for example now. There is a virtual network, right? If I'm not, there is a virtual network that is on-premise. That means I need to make a plan. Sorry, I need to make a plan on what is going to be hosted in the virtual network. Now things around. Do I want? Am I going to have? Am I going to have I'm going to have any app services. Am I going to have data bricks? Am I going to the kind of resources that's going to host? So, for example, if someone come, if Helen just put an example, if Helen say, "Hey, I want to move to Azure," I'm going to like look at Helen. Okay, how many resources are you looking to move to Azure? What's the network configuration going to look like? Are we going to have virtual networks connected to each other, which is basically called VNet pairing? So, what kind of resources are we going to have? Right? Would there be a firewall in front of a virtual network? Will this virtual network talk to other virtual networks? Are we going to use VNet pairing, or are we going to use a V1, for example? Or how are we going to basically handle the connections? That's one of the things I would ask. So, but the most important thing is, okay, the IP addressing of that network, honestly, IP addresses. So if Helen environment is going to have multiple resources, for example, they are looking to grow from zero to have more than 1,000 resources. That means I need to make plan for the number of IPs that will be in that virtual network, right? I need to make that plan. I need to make that plan. So what's going to happen in this case now? I'm not going to come and say, hey, okay, um, I'm going to come and plan around. Okay, I'm going to come and plan how many IP addresses do I have to have? How many subnets do I want to have? Is this going to be the hub network? Are there going to be other multiple subnets connect or multiple VNets connected to this hub VNet? These are the things I need to plan about. So creating virtual networks. I know this looks like I am theory, but we're going to do the practical at the end of the class. But to create a virtual network, you can create a new virtual network at any time. You need to plan an address space. And if you're creating a virtual network, you must create at least one subnet. One subnet is like C subnet. See, say like the way you have a cake. So for example, then I gifted Win a cake. If I gift her a cake now, she probably will not try start eating the cake from the center, right? But she might just basically cut it into several pieces. So cut it, if you create a subnet, if you cut a create segment of the cake, she's probably not going to start spoon and scoop from the cake from the middle and eat. She's probably cut it and eat it. That's what subnetting is all about. So when you dissect your virtual network into different pieces, so the different segments into different pieces, that different piece is called a subnet. You cannot create a subnet you cannot create a VNet without creating a subnet. So any VNet must have at least one subnet created on it by default. One, you can have multiple subnets, but you have to create one subnet in it by default while creating it. Also, overlapping spaces. Overlapping spaces is something I would like to allow to talk about. So, for example, now, if my environment is going to connect to hybrid, to my on-premise, if it's going to connect to on-premise, so that means I need to think about how these two connections are happening. So because of that, one of the things I must do is to make sure that I don't have the IP address I have on premise. I don't have it running on Azure because you cannot have overlapping IP addresses. So, if, for example, if I have 10.0.0.1 for a server in on premise, I cannot have 10.0.0.1 for a server in Azure. So, because especially if these two environments will communicate with each other, if they are going to communicate through V1 or anything, I have to take care of this. I have to think about this. That's very, very important. So you will not have overlapping IP addresses overlapping IP addresses. You will not have overlapping, or you will not also have. You must have at least one subnet connected with each other. That's very key to know in VNet, right? In a VNet. So another thing I would like to point out is how to create subnets. So this example of a subnet, you can see subnet 0, subnet 1, subnet 2, Azure Bastion subnet, and gateway subnet. The things I want to point out in this, right? I'll show you guys how to create it towards the end of the class in the lab. But things I have to point out is you see these last two, so gateway subnet and Azure Bastion subnet. These are subnets that are created for a specific use. So, for example, now that's why planning is very critical when you are doing networking, when you're creating a VNet. So most times now, if someone reaches out and say, "Hey, I want to create a VNet. I want to have this and this and this in VNet." One of the things I will ask is, "What do you want in this VNet? What do you want in this VNet? Which resources do you want in this VNet?" For example, now, if you want to host a resource, let me use resource like an app service. An app service, if you want to host it to a VNet, needs you to have some dedicated subnets. If you want to host a VM that has and create a bastion, you need to have what we call Azure Bastion subnet. And there's a limit to the available IP addresses you're going to have. So some of us that would like to take this exam at the end of the class, you need to be mindful of this, because that's one of the things they will ask you. They will ask you, okay, if you look at the past questions or some of the questions are available, on, you see them flowing or run online. It's going to take you, hey, okay, you need to create this resource and this resource and this resource. Can these two resources exist in a single subnet? Can they exist in different subnets? Those are the things you need to plan. You need to think about them. You need to think about it. You need to think about them ahead of time, right? So moving forward, moving forward, one of the things you plan, right? Yeah, I think I've thought about this. You to plan your networking, because if your network is going to connect to on-premise, you can have overlapping IP address range. So, for example, if you are using address 10.0.0/8 on A, it makes sense to use a different slash on Azure. So on Azure, you can go with a 192 or 172, depending on the maximum number of resources you want to have. So you need to plan about this. You cannot have overlapping private IP addresses. And for your internet-facing applications, what they mean. So if I have an application that will communicate over the internet, one of the things I would do ahead of time is to put the application on is to have a public IP address for that application. So for example, I have an application that will host let's say for example, I'm building my website. If I build my website, I'm hosting it on Azure. That means it needs to have wherever I'm hosting it, if it's a VM, if it's an app service, it needs to have a public IP address, because people all around the world are going to visit that application. That's the reason. So to differentiate it, a private IP address is IP address that's internal only. Is internal, is local to you, is local to that network. It's used within your virtual network, right? It's not used outside of your virtual network. A private IP address is for communication outside of the internet. For example, let me speak of I'm building an application that will what application do that. Let me I'm building an application that will a mobile app for a bank, right? If I move a mobile bank app and I make it private, I make the front end private. It doesn't make sense, because if it's private, how will Leo from wherever he's staying be able to connect to this application and connect to this application and do his banking transactions? No. So there should be a front end that is public, whereby people can connect to the application. So those are things to know. That's the basic difference between private IP address and public IP addresses. And that thing to note is that public IP addresses is limited in the world, right? So that's why you cannot use. It's not advisable to use public IP addresses in place of private IP addresses. So it's not it's not they are scarce. They are scarce in the world. They actually finished. Private IP addresses, you can always generate this one. So public IP addresses are being issued to us by our service providers and all that. All right. How do you create a public IP address? Basically, just like almost all resources in Azure, you go to create. You can actually create a IP address, a public IP address. The things to note: you can either be a standard or a premium, a standard SKU or a premium SKU. So, and premium standard or premium SKU depends. Okay, hey, is this going to region or global? Is it going to? Do you want a public IP address to be routed only within Microsoft network? So it's possible you can create a public IP address that routes only internal with the Microsoft network. It doesn't go external, and you can create one that also routes external. So how do you associate where can you associate public IP address? So this guy is very important, because it's one of the questions I see it every day. I see it every time I am reviewing AZ-104 questions for people that want to write certification. So you can associate it. They can ask you, where can you associate a public IP address? So a public IP address cannot be associated to all resources, can only be associated to specific resources. So the place you can associate it is, for example, is a virtual machine, is a NIC. You can associate a public IP address. In a load balancer, yes, you can associate a load balancer front end. You can associate a public IP address. In a VPN gateway, you can associate a public IP address. In an application gateway, you can associate a public IP address. You can ask me, so what is all this? A virtual machine, we all know what a VM is, right? A VM basically is like a server or a computer, a server you create on Azure. A load balancer is basically just like the name is basically used to distribute load. So for example, now I'm building an application. Christmas is coming, right? I'm building an application like Amazon now. I'm building an application like Amazon. I know that people are going to reach out to are going to connect to it because of a Black Friday and all that. What am I going to do? I'm going to build multiple instances of that application. The reason I'm doing this, sorry guys, I'm going to build multiple instances of the application. The reason I'm doing this is that I want to show whereby this application is available. I want to say whereby this application is available no matter what. So what I mean is available, I want to show by if there is so much traffic and A is full, it should be able to. There's the B instance people can also connect to B. So what do? I create multiple instances of this application and I put a load balancer in the front. Just like the name of the load balancer is basically the job of the load balancer is basically to distribute traffic across. That's just what it is. VPN gateway. VPN gateway is basically designed to connect your on-premise to connect your network, virtual network, your environment to another environment. So it could be two environments in Azure, over VPN, right? It could be two environments in Azure. It could be two environments in separate. It could be two instance, it could be two networks in a different region. For example, maybe I'm in Azure, I want to connect to my AWS environment. I need to create a VPN gateway. A VPN gateway is simple like a VPN device you have on your network and on premise. So in Azure, you could call it VPN gateway. And now another thing I would like to mention, just try to explain some of the resources. Application gateway. Application gateway is a layer 7 load balancer. Someone asked me what you explain load balancer. What do you mean by layer 7 load balancer? A layer 7 load balancer is simply the one that operates at layer 7. So if you remember, if you go through what we call the OSI model basically has OSI model is basically these 7 layers that is used to classify networks. So you have the physical layer, you have the data link layer, you have the network layer. If I can still remember all of them, application layer, session layer, and oh god, I will forget most of them. But these are the 7 layers that's used to configure classify networks. So the reason for this is basically say, hey, if something if something is behaving if something is happening at this particular layer, at the application layer, we can say, okay, this is an application layer error, this application layer device. So we'll troubleshoot it in that layer. That's basically just what it is. So application gateway is the layer 7 load balancer that is used to distribute traffic. The beauty thing about this is that it means at that layer 7, it can do things beyond just normal routing. It can do path-based routing. It can do things around mapping host names. For example, now, let me use, for example, I built an application. The application has images. I can decide, okay, hey, for all the images, go to AWS and get it. Right, for all the images, go to a particular storage account and get it. For the application code, go to my website, go to my app service and get it. For me to be able to do that URL based mapping, I need application gateway. So that's what application gateway is all about. So note 2 things. Let's say, where can you associate public IP addresses, virtual machine, load balancer, VPN gateway, application gateway. Moving forward, where can you associate private IP addresses? You can associate to a virtual machine. A virtual machine is a place you can associate private IP addresses, right? You can put it there. You can associate it to an internal load balancer. In an internal load balancer, yes, you can associate a virtual. You can associate what they call it again. You can associate a private IP addresses. And application gateway, yes, for the front-end configuration, you can also put a private IP address. Associate that means you can assign it to there. Okay, right. An IP address can either be 2 things. It can be dynamic or static. Dynamic means, hey, this IP address can change. So that means if I assign a dynamic address of let me use 10.0.0.10, right? Dynamic means that maybe when I restart my device, that IP address might be moved from .10 to .11 or .12. That means it's dynamic. Something else can pick up that resource, can pick up the IP addresses. I can pick up the IP address. But if I make it static, that means no matter what happens, that IP address is assigned to me, is reserved for me. That means it's not going to get assigned to anybody else, right? I'm going to do the demonstration at the end of the class just to put all the demonstration together. The next thing I'm
So,
going to talk about. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
so just a quick recap, guys, for what he's trying to say. Let me just add up to what he has said already. When you talk about how you plan your virtual machine, when you talk about virtual machine, basically virtual machine is like think of this like planning a neighborhood before building houses. You decide how big the house should be and how many streets are you going to have within the streets you're talking about is the subnet. So when you are building an environment now, for example, you are building a house within a particular region, you have to determine which kind of neighborhood. That's the virtual network you're talking about. Then when you talk about streets, you're talking about the subnets. I'm just giving examples. Then when you talk about houses now, the houses are the servers, are the applications where you will live and all of that. Then when it's talking about how to create a virtual machine, a virtual network that you know, to create a virtual network is like it's like the neighborhood itself. But in the cloud environment, it is a private space where resources and computers can talk to each other. Think about that, where resources and computers can talk to each other. That's how I'm going to put it that way. Then when you talk about subnets inside that neighborhood now, let's say you live in an estate. I live in Richmond Estate. Inside Richmond Estate now, there are streets in that estate. Each of those streets, street A is for web server, street B is for database, street C is for application server. So they are different. I'm just giving you layman terms how you can organize and when you're creating virtual network, how you can organize them. Then when you talk about planning IP address, in every house, in every house in the streets in an estate, right? Every house needs an address. So that mailbox can emails and other physical email can get to those mailbox. So that is what IP address is all about. Without the help of IP address, you cannot locate a particular house. So I'm just giving you layman terms so that you guys can understand what it is. So for every house, for example, if your neighborhood is 10.10.10.0.0/16, which means street A, from street A will be 10.0.0.10.1.0/24. Street B should be 10.0.2.0/24. So they're like that, .2, .3, .4, and all of that. So when you talk about how to create a public IP address, creating a public IP address is like giving out your house a phone number and giving your house a number or a phone number so people can outside the neighborhood can call you through that number. So if you want your website to be accessed from any angle, I know some of you know what IP address is. If you want your website to be accessed from anywhere, any part of the world, you give it to that public IP where they can access that. And also how to associate your public IP, as he has also stated. After you create an IP address, after creating let's say you create an IP address, which is after creating the phone number, you can attach it to a particular house, which is a server. So when you're building your virtual machine, you create an IP address and attach this IP address to this particular virtual machine. The virtual machine is your online, your cloud computer they are talking about. It's not physical computer that we are using at our home or offices. The virtual machine they're talking about is your computer that you build in the cloud. Virtual means you are not seeing it physically, but it's a computer that is virtually located somewhere in the cloud. Then how do you allocate IP address? Private IPs are like house numbers in different neighborhoods. So just take, for example, how these things work. So I think he's going to demonstrate that. I don't know if that's really makes some sense to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to show this more in the lab, but just moving forward. NSGs, network security groups. What are network security groups? Network security groups is basically how you apply effective rules. It's like, I don't want to call it firewalls, but like they're a bit like access lists. So for example, now, if I create a network security group that says, okay, can I allow Helen's VM to talk to Nonsense VM? If I say no, do not allow it, or allow it only on particular environments. For example, now, I can say, okay, well, Helen VM can talk to Nonsense VM, but only on port 443, right? Or LNVM can talk to non-source VM only on port 445. Or sorry, for example, I can say a data factory can connect, let me use the word connect to non-source VM only on ports 445 or 443. These are basically ways you implement restrictions on Azure, right? Without NSGs, without NS, you can implement through firewalls, but you can also implement NSGs basically for connection between within services. For example, you want the service to connect to this service, and there's all inside subscription inside the same subscription. You can use NSGs to communicate with that, right? To show you, I will show all these examples towards the end, but to just communicate it, they're just simply security rules. If you look at this screen now, this screen is basically saying this is an example of NSG. So look at it, 100 inbound, 100 priority 100 things to note out. The name doesn't matter, but it matters just for you to know what is there. But it says RDP inbound. There is a port 3389. There is a protocol that is any. There is a source that is ending, there's a decision that is ending, and the action you're saying allow. What is this basically telling us? When it comes to Azure, when it comes to NSGs in Azure, you need to take note of a few things. One of the first things to take is priority, right? All NSGs priority must have a priority, and priority starts from 100, right? So if you want to start a priority, if I want the highest is actually the lowest in number. So for the highest priority I can have is actually 100. Is 100. So for example, if I want to, I cannot have a priority of 99. It must start with 100. So if I have a priority of 100, I say, hey, allow RDP, and I have a priority of 101, right? That says do not allow RDP. Which one will actually get implemented first? The one that says 100. So that's why priority is very important, right? That's the things to note. Another thing to note is the port. Just like I was mentioning 443 and 445 before, port is basically which port do you want to communicate between the services? Which ports am I allowing this to come in? So if you look at just beyond priority or on top priority, you have what I call security, inbound security rules. Inbound security rules is basically how inbound, means inbound connection. For example, if it's a VM, let's say this NSG is for a VM, is going to mean which connections am I allowing to come into this VM? Please note. So that means if I'm coming to this VM, if I'm coming to this VM from the internet and I'm trying to access this VM, if port 443, which I can see here, it's not enabled, right? It is not, in this example, it's not enabled. It's not going to allow me to connect. If there's a website hosted in that VM, I won't be able to connect to that website because what port 43 is blocked. But for in this case, 3389 is enabled, which port 3389, which means that hey, I'm allowed to connect to this, which is basically RDP. 3389 RDP is how you connect to a VM that is a Windows VM. If it's Linux, it has to be port 22. So if as 3389 is enabled, that means I'm allowed to connect to this VM on port 3389, and that means that and it's saying which protocol, any you can have two protocols, either TCP or UDP. TCP, if it is TCP, just to explain TCP. TCP is I would call it a secure connection. So a connection that is what's that word I'm looking for? A connection that is I'm not using the word secured, maintained, like a secure connection. That means a stateful connection. That means if I want to connect through TCP, sorry guys. Sorry guys. Sorry. Sorry guys. So but sorry, I don't know. Let me put my phone on silent. Sorry. So what does this mean? Because if someone is coming to TCP, the TCP connection, that means the connection is connected. So you're going to have things like a TCP handshake. And if I'm trying to connect through TCP, what is going to happen is going to pause. It's going to make sure the way the connection established is basically it does what we call a TCP handshake. What is TCP handshake? Hey, I want to connect to Helen, I send hello to Helen. Helen sends him, and Helen acknowledges my hello, and sends me a hello back, right? So if I can establish that two connection, that means there's a handshake between both of us. Then I can send traffic to Helen. That's a TCP connection handshake. If is UDP, UDP doesn't have connection, so the UDP will just start sending message. It doesn't care whether there is active. It doesn't try to establish some kind of connection between both of us before it's sending. So that's the protocol. There is asking you which protocol is it going to connect to. So in this case, I said any. And that means you can use any protocol, whether TCP or UDP. The next one is basically saying source. Where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? For example, now it's true that I want to allow RDP, but I can decide, okay, I don't want RDP. I don't want anybody in the world to connect to me. I can say I want only IP addresses from my house. I want only IP addresses from my data center. I want only a VM to be able to connect to this VM, not every other VM. So I can set the source. But in this case, they use any, and that means any IP address can connect to this. And destination is literally saying any. So for that means if this NSG is not just over a VM, if it's attached to a subnet or a VNet, that means every VM there you can access it. So to set up the next thing we're going to talk about is about the effective routes. Effective NSG is basically, that's why if you look just to show you a little bit, if you look at the name, you see there's something like exclamation mark, not like a warning, tell you, hey, this is not the best way to cover your environment. Most times in enterprise environment, in your workplace, you will not see something like this. It's only in labs that you see things like this. So in your environment, you're likely going to get restrictions. I'm going to say, hey, okay, you can connect, you can create this in your environment. Say, okay, we are allowed 3389 RDP ports, but it's only on our IP addresses, only for people in this particular IP range. So there will be restrictions set to them, right? Most times the 65,000 rules, 65,000 priorities, 65,101, they are all default connections. So those ones, if you create any NSG in Azure, they come there by default. You can delete them, but most of them are by default. You are allowed to. You can now modify them. You can modify them. You can add rules on top of them, because what matters again is priority. So remember, 101 is lesser priority than 100. The higher the number, the lesser the priority, right? The lesser the priority. So if you have a deny all that is 100, say you see that 6555500, deny all inbound, any deny, action deny. If this is 100 and I now have a 65,000 and say allow, automatically to get denied, because this one supersedes everything, right? Because remember, the higher the number, the higher the lower the priority, right? That's one of the things to note about NSGs. Determine effective rules. This, I've seen this guy troubleshooting enough. So some people will have because you can attach NSG to a subnet, you can attach it to a VNet, you can attach it to a NIC, right? So in some instances, I'll see, okay, in the NIC, in the NIC, in the network interface card, which is the NIC, is already allowed. You have allowed RDP, but NSGs that are in the subnet level, in the subnet level or in the VNet level are all set to disable. Of course, it's going to start evaluating, just like saying, let me use for example my house now. If I come and say, okay, hey, Dominic, you have access to my room, but the gate of my estate is blocked. The door is blocked. How will Dominic get into my room? Of course, if he gets to the estate, first of all, they'll bounce you. First of all, you won't be able to get into there. So if you have an allow rule that you want to allow to my room, I need to make sure that, hey, I give him access to my room one. There is also access granted to the door of my house too. They also access granted to the door of my estate. So you need to look at all those NSG rules. NSG rules for effective rule. You need to make sure there is allow from point of entry, right? Make sure that is allowed. Moving forward, how to create NSG rules. Source basically, you can use things like any, means any IP addresses. You can use anything, any IP address can connect, or you can use like a specific IP address. You can use my IP address. You can use service tags. You can use application security group. destination. Where do you want to go? You can say any. I mean, you want it to, you're scattering, you're going anywhere. You can use IP addresses, you can use service tag, you can use application group. Service, what type of service are you doing? Do you want to enable DNS? You want to SSH? You want to set priority? Remember what I said to you, priority. Priority, the lower number, the higher the priority. Lower the number, the higher priority. But remember, it must start from 100. It cannot start from 99. It must be a 3 digits. Yeah, 100. Please remember that. It's very critical. Sorry, you want to say something?
Yes. So again, in case everybody is trying to find out how difficult when they talk about the OSI model, I mean, I just put that in the chat. The OSI model, basically, I don't want to try to confuse you. I just want to go back to what you have said before, and I think one or two persons are getting confused about it. I mean, don't get frightened if you get to a stage where you have issues in terms of how to understand each of these. Please ask questions. That's why we are here. Again, I'm talking about the OSI model. I just shared that there are 7 different models, standardized model in the network session, right? Which how I used to understand it is all people set to network data physically. The all is the application layer, which is the interface between the end user and the software or the provider, right? The people that are talking is the presentation layer. I'm just giving an acronym for it, how I understood it. And so all of these things are applied within the network protocol in Azure. So please bear in mind, know this, which if you have any questions, you can drop it in the chat, and then we'll continue from where we stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Application security groups. Someone will say, hey, no, so I started again. Which one is application security groups? It's basically used to deploy, to create, like, you can group, for example, imagine now if I have web servers, right? I have database servers, and I want my web servers to communicate to database server. Does it make sense to create a different NSG group? Create different NSGs for each one? Can't I like create what you call an NSG and basically group all them and say, okay, hey, all web servers, all web apps, let's say my web applications, right, can communicate to database servers on ports, let's things like port 1433 for 1433 is was it 1433 or 1432? I'm missing it. Is for SQL databases. 6452 is 6432 is for Postgres. I can actually create a group, a rule that groups all these things together. So that's just basically what ASG is all about. You can, if you want to create a group, a bunch of rules that are grouped together, basically they call it application security groups. I'm going to show an example of this, but I didn't want us to jump on job. So the next thing we're going to talk about is host your domain on Azure. So for example, now to summarize this, Azure DNS. Azure DNS is basically used for domain name resolution. So for example, how many of us have a website? Okay. If you have a website, for example, if you have a website now, just to give you website 101, if you have a website, let's say for example, nonso.com, right? That nonso.com, if somebody hits nonso.com, what's going to happen in the background is nonso.com is going to translate to an IP address, preferably a public IP address, let's say a public IP address, right? What handles that is DNS. So where do I want that DNS to be hosted? I can decide, okay, I want this DNS to be hosted in Azure, and I can host it in Azure DNS. And I can create DNS record. I can create a CNAME record. They say, hey, if it's nonso.com, I can create, if let's say tomorrow nonso.com gets bought by Microsoft, I can say, okay, I want a station where whenever somebody visits it's nonso.com, you should direct that person to Microsoft.com. If in that case, that means I need to create a CNAME record that directs traffic. That say, okay, if you keep this, direct to this. That's one thing it's going to do. I can create what we call, that's a CNAME record. I can create custom domains that say, okay, if you go to helen.noso.com, it should take you to the let me use beauty part of our website. If you go to leo.noso.com, it will take you to the it will take you, let me say for example, it will take you to the that's subdomains. It to create you to the Gmail part of our website, right? These are custom domains. Where do I create all these things? if I onboard the domain to Azure, if I onboard the domain to Azure DNS, I can actually create things there, these things there inside Azure DNS. So how do you configure Azure DNS? So for example, now if I go to Azure DNS and I try to do, for example, like nonso.com, it's going to ask me, hey, verify that you are the owner of nonso.com. For example, if Helen has already bought nonso.com for her husband, right, or for her partner, it doesn't make it, and I am trying to claim it in Azure. Azure is saying, no, so verify that you are the owner of nonso.com, because it's possible that this name is already bought somewhere. So one of the things is when I put the name, it's going to ask me to do what we call DNS verification. So I need to verify that I own this DNS. So if I'm able to verify that I own it by putting things like DNS code, TXT, automatically I can create records. I can create alias records on it. So you can see example, say, hey, a record sets a collection of zones in Azure. This is just DNS 101. You cannot create, for example, if you create dominic.nonso.com, you cannot have two dominic.nonso.com. It's not possible. You cannot create that, right? You can add up to 20 records per record set, right? It's totally possible. That's just to summarize it up and down. You can have IP addresses, IP address mapped to them, right? I think I have this. I think I have an example of this. I'll try and check. I'll show you. Configure a private DNS zone. A private DNS zone is basically saying, hey, okay, this guy is not routing over the internet. I want for the services I owe in Azure. For example, I have a VM, I have an app service, I have a Databricks, I have a data factory. I want a situation whereby these resources are communicating each other. These things are communicating to each other using what? DNS names. I don't want to be using IP addresses. For example, you remember when I say IP address can be static, it can be dynamic. I want a situation whereby if someone is trying to access Nonso's VM, just like within my environment, I just want to use Nonso VM, right? .nonso.com, Nonso VM1.nonso.com. That's talking about the app server or app server VM. So app server VM.nonso.com. That is talking about the app server DB server. So if I want to do those DNS resolution internally, then I can use what we call a private DNS zone. A private DNS zone is basically a way to communicate internally within your network, using DNS names. You don't want to use IP address. You don't want to be cramming IP address. Someone asks me, okay, if it's a 10.0.0.4, for example, it's easy. But imagine when this spans over to 1,000 resources or more resources, it's more it's more likely going to be that if, sorry guys, it's more, I lost my thoughts here. It's more likely going to be that your is more likely going to be that the DNS is going to is more likely, you're more likely to remember names than you remember numbers. So for example, that's why we actually have a phone book. Imagine if I want to call Win, for example, now I'll be looking for a number plus 31, that this. But I'm more likely to search for Win in my phone and call her if I'm looking for Leo. So that's what DNS is all about. Basically, they call it the phone book of the internet. So if you want to route privately in Azure, you can use to remember names privately in Azure. You can use a private DNS server. Okay. This now it's time for labs. I think this will
a quick one here. I think Leo asked a question. Okay, Leo, sure. What is your question again, please? That's it.
You can hear us.
Yeah, sorry. Good evening. I can hear, but I can't type. I don't know. It's saying failed to send. I don't know if any other person can send it.
You're breaking a little bit.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I said I can't send a message on the platform. It's saying failed to send.
Oh, failed to send.
Yeah.
Let me try sending the message. Let me see whether it's from you or from me.
Yeah, I can see your message.
Okay, so yeah, maybe it might be coming from your network, because I basically have the same right as all of you. I don't have the social rights.
You can ask your question here in the chat.
Okay, maybe I can sign out and come.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can ask your question, Leo.
Oh, okay. I just want to ask. Also, you mentioned fasting, firewall, and Azure gateway. Huh? So I was saying that if it's a good practice to always have on the network, then also when do we use public IP and private IP? There are times you have to use one or there are times particular one. Then also NSG and firewall, are they the same thing or they're separate? Or can they be
Okay. Leo, let me see what I understand very well. You're asking about. You said we said one of your questions is whether NSG and firewall are the same thing, right? That's what your question says,
yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. Uh, yes. NSG and firewalls are not the same thing because, for example, on a firewall, you can go to they solve the same thing. They solve the same thing. They can help to prevent traffic. But the difference between NSG and firewall is that firewall is stateful. When I mean by stateful, it means there are logs. You can actually go if something being blocked on NSG on firewall, you can go and see the logs. In NSG by default, I want to use that one. By default, there are no logs. If something getting blocked on the NSG, there is no way for you to see it. But they can perform similar function. But things around, I say, I'm trying to get an example for you. Things around NATing, not source NATing, DNATing, port NATing. NATing is basically mapping IP address, mapping a public IP address to a private IP address. Internal NSGs cannot do it. Only firewall can do it. But the basic example of just basically stopping connections, yes, they can do it. They can perform it. So they are similar, but they're not the same thing. They're similar, but they're not the same thing. They can perform similar results, but they're not the same thing. Both of them are actually needed in your environment. You need to have a firewall. You also need to have an NSG. Then the question you asked me, okay, where another question, I think I probably didn't get you correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, you mentioned fasting.
Bastion.
Yeah.
Bastion.
And also,
Okay. Bastion
yeah,
in Azure, basically, Microsoft created Bastion. What is Bastion? Bastion in Azure is basically something very, very weird. It's a way for you to connect to VMs through the browser, just to put it. So, for example, if I want to RDP to a VM now, for example, one of the things I basically need to do is to download, is to do RDP. Either I do RDP or I do SSH, depending on whether Linux. For SSH, I'll need the SSH client. Whether, for example, from a MacBook, when I'm using for a MacBook now, I can connect to my MacBook has a default by the SSH client. But if it's a Windows now, I don't have an SSH client. So that means I need to download an SSH client like PuTTY to connect. So, but with Bastion, I can connect through the browser. If I create a Bastion now, which is not free to put it lightly, is not free. I can actually come here and create a resource on the browser. I can actually connect. I can actually connect to that VM and manage the VM from the browser. Right. So most organizations, what they are doing, for example, now they don't want you to download. They want to connect from your VM, right? From your server, from your laptops. They create a Bastion host. That Bastion is going to help connections. So that means if you want to manage this VM, whether you're on the train, you're on the plane, you're on the move, or you are just using you're not even using a laptop that is verified by their company. They're saying with this Bastion, you can connect to IVM from the browser. You can connect to a VM from the browser. I wish I can show you an example. So I'm seeing this subscription. Yeah, I'm trying to remember where. Oh, okay. I think it's a subscription where I can do much more. I can create, maybe at the end I'll create a Bastion host if we still have time. I want to start with VNet now and NSGs.
So Leo, in case you are wondering what Bastion is like, it allows you to securely connect your virtual machine without exposing it to the internet, which means instead of using public IP address for RDP or SSH, that is secure socket layer, you can connect through Bastion inside the Azure portal. That means once you connect your virtual machine through Bastion, you have to connect it through the browser. And then, but first, you first of all enable Bastion from Azure portal. If you have already VM existing, when you connect, you can RDP to a virtual machine, but you don't want to do that through RDP. And you can use Bastion, which means connect it through the browser, and then you can just enter the virtual machine like in a browser, for example. So the benefit of using Bastion to connect to virtual machines, it reduces attack surface and improves security, which means no hacker, no matter how the hacker is not going to see it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the examples. I want to create what a VNet. So first of all, to create a VNet, just come and type virtual network. Let me use virtual network.
Sorry, guys. A quick one here. Can you guys see the screen clearly?
No,
Because
I thought it was just like that.
Can you see the screen clearly, everyone? Because it looks like we are.
It's blurry.
It's blurry.
Blurring. Yeah, I thought it was
Okay.
just only.
Okay. All right. I'm going to
Yes,
disconnect and
it's
try
blurry.
I'm going to try to reconnect. Papa, I'm going to try to reconnect from a different browser. 1 minute. Let me connect. I'll reconnect from a different browser. Just give me a few minutes. About disabling. Stop sharing.
So in case you're asking, if you have a question you want to ask, please feel free to ask your question or just type it in the chat box, and then I'll jump on those questions too. I know this is networking is always very technical, because if you want to become a DevOps engineer, networking is key. It's a process, it's a concept that is widely used across all environments. So please bear in mind, know this, that if you want to go deep within the Azure DevOps or Azure admin, you have to understand how networking works. So if you have any questions, I will be glad if you drop your questions in the chat, or possibly ask why the session is still on, so that we'll gladly respond to those questions. I know if you're getting confused along the line, please retract back and ask your questions step by step. This is what I would love to get from you guys, because sometimes when you don't ask questions, it means that you are not following, or it means that maybe you're just listening for listening's sake. Because with time to come, we'll start doing some tasks and then asking you guys to pinpoint each of the resources, how to use them, or how to connect to allow two computers to communicate with each other. I mean, these are the things that we need to will be doing within time. I like the fact that we'll go through the whole. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can accept. I think he's back. No, he's not yet back. So Leo, see if you can type your question again and see, because right now it looks like you are. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad if you ask me questions, because I mean, these questions would help surface or get a better understanding of where you're having issues on the networking side. Networking is very broad. If you're not understanding a particular thing within this part, please feel free, relax your mind, retract back and draft your questions, put them back again, and then I'll be glad to respond to those questions.
Okay. I'm back.
Okay, welcome back.
Let me see. Let me see. I'm coming back.
Sorry, Dominic. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Please, I want to ask. Please, should we always use private IP or public IP, or what can we use like that?
I think you are breaking up. Your line is breaking up.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I said, when do we use private IP and when do we use public IP?
So you can use both of them anytime. So the private IP is, for example, you are creating a VM. You can create a VM immediately and set it on private, which means no external people, users or unauthorized users can see that particular what's it called? That particular virtual machine. If you set it on public, which means anybody can just be strolling online and then they will definitely see you can use both of them at the same time, but the best bet is to always put your virtual machines on private network, because I would advise you to leave it on private. The moment you create a virtual machine and leave it on public network in an enterprise environment, that is in a working environment, you will have yourself to be blamed. I give you within 20, 30 minutes, they'll have that virtual machine. I'm very certain you had that issue. You'll be very shocked. They'll enter through they'll use tunnel and bust into your network and then do all kind of things. So it is advisable to use private network and not to use public network on most occasions, except you just choose to use the public IP address or network thereabout. Thank you. Vitalis, you can ask your question, please.
Okay, good everyone. So actually it's not a question, just to add on what you said. So yeah, so the private network, okay. Let's just keep it simple. Private network doesn't have access to internet. Public network have access to internet. So anything you provision in private network, nobody from public or nobody from internet can access it. Okay, but anything you provision on private have direct access to internet. But there are some configurations also you can put in place that will give your private network access to internet. So in a plain explanation, public network have direct access to internet. Why the private does not? Yep. Thank you.
So also we can see the screen now, please.
Okay, how does it look now? Better?
Yeah, right. Thank you, Vitalis. Yeah, we can.
Vitalis, yeah, sorry. Okay, basically, so we're trying to create a VNet, right? So one of the labs come here, create a VNet, create a VNet. I'm going to create a VNet. So of course you need to set the subscription the VNet will be in. Next thing you select the group, resource group. Remember what we said, everything you create in Azure must have be created inside the resource group, right? I'm going to come here and create it. I call it AZ104 Sunday evening class. Well, I'm going to say AZ104. So what is the name of this VNet? 0 to hero. Let me use 02 -T hero AZ104. That's the name of this VNet, right? Next, then go to next. Security. Do I want to enable VNet encryption? Do I want to enable Azure Bastion? So if I want Azure Bastion, remember, I want to enable Azure Bastion with VNet, I can enable it. But remember what I say, hey, Azure Bastion is the paid service that provides secure RDP and SSH connectivity to your virtual network over TLX. When you connect via the virtual network, do not need a public IP address. So I can actually enable this. But automatically what it's trying to do is trying to create a subnet. But remember, they say it's a paid service. So I'm going to check out now. Do I want to enable Azure Firewall? Azure Firewall, like I said, Azure Firewall, it's not a paid service. It's also a paid service. It's a paid service. Azure Firewall is a managed cloud network security that protects you for your virtual environment and network resources. Do I want to enable this? It's going to try to create a firewall device. Of course, it's going to cost money. Let me check. I can choose the basic tier. But basically requires a firewall policy, an Azure firewall policy. Basic queue requires a firewall policy. So I'm going to just uncheck this. I'm not creating this at the moment because, of course, I don't want it to consume a lot of my subscription. So another thing is Azure DDoS network protection. So do I want to enable a DDoS network protection, right? Again, this also costs money, and this is also not free, right? So I said DDoS plan. I don't have an DDoS plan existing, so I need to create a DDoS plan existing before I can be able to do that. So I can create a DDoS plan, or I just uncheck it just to move forward. The next thing I'm going to go and talk about is going to talk about IP address ranges. So automatically, because I checked on firewall and checked on firewall and I checked on bastion, is automatically try to create these subnets for me. Well, if I didn't check those, this is likely what I'm going to have. This is by default what I'm going to have. Let me remove this. Click what I'm going to have. I'm going to have a default. So one of the things you do, if you have to create a VNet, most times when you want to create a VNet in an environment, all right, enterprise environment, what they're going to have, they're going to give you a subnet, a block of IPs, a CIDR IP addresses. So what you normally do is when you're going to create a VNet, you may reach out to the network team. In some cases, there's no network team. In some cases, you are the network team, right? So you have to go to your IP map and choose the next available IP bunch from there. In this case, I'm going to, in case I'm everything, right? I'm going to just go for something. I can go for a 10.0. This is the highest. That means if I choose this, I'm going to have 5,000 IP, available IP addresses to me. So am I expecting that in my environment, I'll create up to 5,000 resources? If you're selecting this, be careful of with a few things. Just confirm that you are not using a 10.0.0 in your on-prem environment. So if you plan for it, if I have a plan that this IP address, that this VNet is going to connect to my on-premise or to other VNets, I need to make sure that the IP address does not overlap. So for example, now I can let me create this. I'm going to reduce this because I think it's way too much. I can actually go this, or you know what? I'm going to allow this. Let me make it as a /24, right? This will not fly. And if I did this, so I can go. Okay, this will just use all the IP addresses, but I can just go 24/24. No, I don't want to use all the available IP addresses. I want to split it a little bit. Let me see. I'll go for 827, right? I'll call it that one, not default. I'll call it app subnet. Right, this is me creating different subnets now, right? I'm creating one app subnet. Just to save it, I'm going to, okay, yes, I want to explain these things. They're very, very important. They're very important because if you understand this, I'll say you understand the VNet 90% of the time. Things to note, NAT gateway. Network gateway. Remember when I said about NAT, and I say NAT is all about network address translation. You translate public IP address into private IP addresses. That's what NAT is all about. Do you have a NAT gateway in your environment? In this case, we don't have, so I'm going to free this. But I'm going to move to the next one, talk about network security group. Do we have a network security group? So for example, how do I want to manage my VNets? How do I want to manage my VNet, my network security group, my NSG? Do I want to have NSGs at the VNet level, at the subnet level, or at the NIC level? Right? Some people have NSGs at the VNet level. Some companies have it at the subnet level. Some have it at the resource level. So what you likely get is like, okay, hey, for me, from my experience, I think the best way to manage it is at the subnet level. So for example, some rules I can have for this subnet will be different from some rules I'll have for this particular subnet. The rules I'll have for the app subnet is different from the rules I'll have for the database subnet. The reason behind my own logical thinking, remember, this is no so logical thinking. Some organizations do it this my ways, some organizations do it differently. Is that I want a situation whereby I can set rules per application, I can set rules per subnet. But in some organizations, they rather manage it from the resource level to be more granular. Some organizations rather manage it from the VNet to have less configuration layers. But I'm just going to create one big NSG now. Let me just create one big NSG now. For example, now Let's see now it's set to none, but I can actually create one. I'll call it what AZ104. AZ104 and say okay. I'll just call it okay. And just create this. It will create this new I created now. Route table. What are route tables? This is none. What are route tables? Basically say how do I want my traffic to go? So for example now, if I want to go to VI from Ogudu, I can go straight from Express. From Tottenham Bridge, I can hit, I can get to, if I get to the foot of Tottenham Bridge, I can either go through Obalende, I can go through Osborne, or I can go through, what's that next one? I've forgotten, sorry, I've not been in Nigeria for a while. Or I can decide to go through Ikorodu Road. That's what routing is all about. Route is which way do you want your traffic to follow? So for in the cases whereby you have, Leo asked about firewall before. If you have a firewall and you want a situation whereby, hey, I want all traffic to pass through my firewall. So you create a table, that means you need to create a route table and you create a 0.0 default route or a 0.0.0 route and say, hey, 0.0/8 and say all routes should route to your firewall. That means anything coming in or leaving this VM, leaving this sub VNet should go to your firewall. So you want your firewall to inspect all routes, then you need to create a route table and direct that. That is what we call UDR, user defined route, when the user defines his own route, right? So another thing to note is service endpoint. These are nothing. There are lots of questions on this. So I'm excited talking this because I've seen where this mess people up. So service endpoint is saying, okay, there are several resources in Azure. I want this VM to connect to them seamlessly. Oh God, why is it not clicking? Papa, give me 1 second. So
Sorry, could you say that again?
What's wrong with Mac? Sorry. So I lost my Windows laptop, not really lost. The battery died over the weekend. So I've already ordered a new one. So trying to connect via Mac is proving funny. Trying via Mac, which I only use. I just have this guy step or somewhere. I've been using it in a while. So okay, this is not agreeing to click. I don't know the reason, but I'm just going to leave it. I don't know why it's not agreeing to click. Okay, the drop down is not clicking. I will show you later. Delegation. So for some reason it's not clicking like it should, but I will explain it later. I'll explain just after I finish creating this. I'll create other subnets. So, but I can explain what the service endpoints are. So service endpoints are, hey, okay, I want my service to integrate seamlessly with other Azure endpoints, Azure services. For example, I want this subnet to integrate seamlessly with Key Vault. I want the service to integrate seamlessly with storage accounts. I can come and enable service endpoints. So that means this subnet can integrate seamless with that. You can enable 1 or 2 or more service endpoints. No wala, no problem. Subnet delegation, on the other hand, is something different. If you delegate, you can only delegate a subnet to a particular service. So if you delegate subnet, for example, to web app, that means inside this subnet, you can only create a web app inside it. You cannot create a VM inside it. You cannot create a Databricks inside it. You cannot create a let me say Postgres inside it. No, because this particular subnet is delegated. It's just like saying you are assigned, you're saying that you give somebody this thing. That's what delegation is all about. So note between the two service endpoints for seamless connections, seamless integrations. Delegation is when you are assigning, when you are giving everything to this for a particular subnet. You're saying this subnet should only be used for this. And some particular resources in Azure will say, hey, I need you to delegate me my own subnet. I cannot share things like Azure Firewall. If you're doing Azure Firewall, you need to delegate a full subnet to it. I'm just going to save this now. Just leaving that app subnet. I'm going to go review. Review and create. Validation is going to run. Running final validation. Can someone tell me what this is doing? Do you remember Azure policy? Do you still remember Azure policy? That's basically what's happening here, but I don't know why it's taking long. It shouldn't take this long. Okay, it's done. So validation passed. What is happening here? What's happening here is basically it's actually evaluating what I wanted to create against Azure policy. If there is a policy that stops people from creating a VNet, it's going to get stopped here. It's not going to. You're going to see validation failed. That's a few things to know. Validation. It's going to see validation failed. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. Just creating it now so we can see. It's deploying. Let's see when it completes. It's deploying. Let's see. Shouldn't take long also. It's creating a security group. We're going to see that network security group now. See an example. All right, finish deploying. We're going to go to the resource. All right, these are VNets, our 02 VNet. So things you check out here. Address space. Address space is an example. That's where you see the number of address space, the address space you used. Things to note here. So for example, let me use an instance that I've seen happen to me several times. You create a VM, you create a VNet, you use the address space, let me use /24 like I used here, and you create so many subnets, and suddenly that is finished. You've used up all the IP addresses. Does it mean that if I want to create another subnet, I need to create another IP address? No, you can actually come here and add more address spaces. You can add one IPv4, an IPv6. For example, if I use IPv4, I can go for A172. 168, I think .0.0. I can go for /24 here. I think so. No, what am I doing? /24. No, what am I doing there? Not here. No, this is I can add the additional address space, which is here. Go for 172.168.0.0 slash let's say /16. I'll just go for /24 here. What am I doing now? I'm adding additional address space to this guy. That's what I'm doing here, right? So let's say, for example, I've created all VNets with this. I've created VNets with this. I created subnets with this, and there is no more address spaces. I need to create more subnets. So you can add additional address space. What you cannot do, however, is resize a subnet. So you see this subnet that I did /27 now. You see is a 27 IP address. Let's say I've created more resources, and this subnet is now available IPs is now 0. I've seen where it's 0, guys. It's 0, and I need to create something. I must be in this subnet. What I cannot do, right? What I cannot do is increase this subnet. No, you cannot increase the subnet. So far as there is resources on it, the only way to increase it is delete it and recreate it. And you cannot delete it if there are resources assigned to them. If I've created VM here, I cannot delete it. Let me create another subnet, call it DB subnet, for example. Now, I can call this guy default. I call it DB subnet. Say /24. I'm going to go for /28, 27 again, just to continue this. If I scroll down now, network security group, I can select the network security group I created before. Route table is still set to none because I've not created a route table. See, now I can do service endpoint, right? Service endpoint, I can say, hey, service endpoint, I can say I want SQL, I want Key Vault, I want Event Hub, I want Service Bus, I want storage. You can add multiple service endpoints. Right, but if I want to delegation, sorry, who wants to ask a question? Serving endpoint policies is none, it's set to none. It always makes sense to set this to none, unless there is a specific reason you want it to behave a certain way. Delegation, if I want to enable delegation, right? Let's say I want to connect. These are different delegations you can enable. So, for example, if you deploy machine learning, you have to make it delegate to this. If I delegate to this, that means I can only use this for what? For machine learning workspaces, right? I'll set this to none. So that's basically the difference between delegation and service endpoint, right? And if I should go back, why is this looking somehow? Yeah, okay, add. So right now I'm creating another subnet, calling it this. So this is basically just how to create subnets. If I want to create NSGs now, this is if I want to edit NSG, add NSG rules. This is an example of an NSG, right? Remember, security group, I can create it. I can add rules. Remember, I said NSGs can be what? Can have incoming and outgoing. Incoming means what is coming into the NSG. Outgoing is what is leaving the NSG. So if I come into this now, incoming now, I can come here and do settings, inbound rules, inbound security rules. You see, there's no rule here. So if I plan to create a VM, I plan to create a VM after this, just to show you guys an example. And I do, I will do an IP address. I can say any. That's when I tell you the traffic. The traffic can come from any. Traffic can come from an IP address. It can come from my IP address saying, hey, I want this browser to automatically pick up my own internal public IP address. It can come from a service tag. Service tag is something very, very sweet. I can say, okay, service tag internet, service tag virtual network, service tag API management. So if I want to enable an API management to connect to this, I don't know the IP address of that. I want all API management to be able to connect to this. I can use service tag API network. The one I normally use mostly is I normally use it like this virtual network and just say, okay, instead of putting the IP address of a virtual network, I can say I want all IP addresses within this virtual network should be able to manage this, to connect to this. But what I'm going to do in this case, I'm not going to use service, I'm going to use my IP address. So it should pick up my own public IP address from home. This is what it is today. It can change tomorrow, right? Destination, where do I want it to go? And can say service tag and select virtual network. So that means I want it to go to this virtual network. Then the next time, the custom, what do I want to do, right? Which ports, which service am I trying to access? If it's RDP, I can choose RDP. So automatically you see picks 3389. If it's HTTPS, I can pick this, that means 43. If it's SQL, my SQL, for example, is coming to PZ, which is 3306. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go custom and go for a wildcard, right? Because a wildcard means everything. Anytime you see asterisks, means a wildcard means I'm allowing a bunch of things, just saying any. So if I go down here, the rule is 100, right? I'm going to make it 1000. So I want to show an example. I'm going to allow all. That's what I'm doing here, allow all. Right? Allow all and do, and that I'm asking my IP address should allow all, but I'm going to add it now. And I want to ask a question. Maybe someone can help me. Okay. I want to add another rule and say anywhere you're coming from, I don't care, I'm going to do a wildcard here and do any and say, okay, hey, any this also, I'm going to have a deny and I'm going to have a 100. So can someone tell me, will I be able to connect to this VM? If I just say VM, will I be able to connect to it? Win, Helen, Victor, you should not talk. Sorry, Vitalis, you should not talk. If you talk, I'll give you knock from here. Leo, Steven. So will I be able to connect?
I don't know if it's my network, but it's like I'm seeing things in slow motion. Like after you're 2 steps ahead, then I see what you do. So I don't know if it's you, I don't know if it's me. I think it's me. And I can't really do much about it because I've refreshed, I've tried leaving and coming back. But I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that.
All right, you're exempted. Win. I know you're introverts, but you have to talk now, right? I'm calling on you. So I have 100 deny all, and I have a 1000 allow all. Which one is going to? if I can I connect to any resource that this energy is placed on top?
No.
No, I don't think you can connect to them.
Very good. Very good. I can connect. Why? Why? Why can't I connect?
Yeah, okay, I think because of the 100 that
Thank
takes
you.
top priority.
Yeah, that's very good because priority matters, right? 100 is higher than 1,000. I know we in language we understand money. 100 pounds is higher than 1,000 naira, right? Just in terms of NSG rules, the priority of the rules matter. So remember, it must start at 100. For example, to show you an example of this, if I click on this rule to edit this rule now, click on the name, can edit it. If I try to do, let me show you guys 99. See, priority must be between 100 and 4,096, right? So it must start from what? 100. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete this rule because of course I want to add, and that is it for NSGs. What else do I want to show you, people? One want to show, one doesn't want to show. Okay, let me see what I can show this. What out of Azure? Okay, if I should go back to home, let me go back to home and go back to, let me see what I can create a virtual machine. Next I'm going to create a virtual machine inside here, and let's see whether we can connect to it. Create virtual machine. All right, I'm using subscription. I'm using this, and I'm going to call it AZ104. All right, I'm going to use West Europe just because I'm in West Europe, it will be closer. But availability zone, I'm not going to worry about all this availability zone, but I'm going to worry about image. So I'm going to use for Ubuntu, latest Ubuntu. I'm going to go for a D2 series. It's this is too expensive, boys. It's too expensive. Let's go cheaper. Yeah, B2 series are cheaper. Let me use something 35. Yes, this guy. Select this guy. Okay. This one friend is cheaper, 35. Okay. Then I'm going to come here and do things around. I want to have a password. So I'm going to use Azure user. I'm going to put a random password. All right, allowed ports. What do you think is going to happen here? Which ports do I want to allow? All right, so of course, if I'm to connect to this VM, I need to allow what? Port 22. Port 22 is very important. So I'm going to allow port 22. But if I'm to host a website in this VM, that means people are going to connect to this VM. That means I need what? I need HTTPS. If I'm going to host an insecure website, I also need HTTP. So I'm just going to allow these two together. I'm going to go to next, and see what's happening here. Disk, I'm going to use difficult disks, 30 gig, no problem. I'm not going to attach an additional disks. I'm going to go to networking. What is happening here? It's trying to create a new network. No, I don't want it to create a new network. I want it to use the existing network I have before. Why is it not using it? Why is it not showing up here? Why? I think I know the reason. Basics is creating a new ASU group. I wanted to use the same network group and same this thing I had before. So I'm going to use, just basically click here. Oh, okay. It's saying this is not available in East US. Let me see what I can use. West Europe. Let me see whether this queue is available in West Europe. Let me see. Oh, it is available. Okay, right. It's available in West Europe. I'm still going further. Disk not available. Disk not making any changes. VNet, I don't want to create a new VNet. No, you should refresh. It's not refreshing. So I'm going to start afresh, guys. I'm going to start afresh. I'm hoping to show DNS region here, but it's not going through. All right, let me see. Starting afresh. Let me see. AZ104, AZ104 class, AZ-104. I'm going to go for West Europe. Password, Azure user, Azure admin. All right, remember ports. I'm not enable all this guy by default. Just go next. What I'm trying to do, I don't want it to create its own NSG. I want it to create from a previous VNet that I have. Hold on, public IP addresses should create public. Well, VNet, I want it to create. Where is that VNet that I created? 1 second, guys. 1 second. Where are you located? Inside this resource group. By default, I should be able to create this VM inside here. So that I'm wondering why it's not showing. 0 to hero, that's the name. 0 to hero, not showing up. Sorry, guys. There are different ways to skin a cat. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into this resource group, this guy. Yeah, I'm going to try to create the VM from here. Just sometimes you can have UI issues, right? If you have UI issues like this, don't sweat it, to be honest. Just try different. So try different. You can use Azure AMP. You can use different ways, but I'm just going to try to create it from here. Let me see whether I can bypass the errors that I'm having. AZ104.
Did you create the other resource in a different subscription? So
No,
check.
It's the same subscription. No, it's the same subscription. I only have one subscription. Yeah, same subscription.
Oh, okay.
D2, this. I'm just going to look for one cheaper. So just in case I forget to delete it, it's not wipe the money before I go brief. I'm going for the cheapest one, cheaper, right? Admin.
So next week, Saturday, I'm thinking we will start asking each and every one or two persons during our live session, demo session, to also share the screen to configure or deploy one or two resources and then share with us while on the chat, while in the session. If you're having difficulties within your own personal account, please feel free to reach out to me after this class. We can use mine.
I think it has to do with the region issue, because I'm trying to create in this region, so it's not allowing me to. That's why. Let me use a one that is available in this region. Let me see. 17. The reason is that, just to put some context, the VM is in East US, is in West Europe, and I'm trying to create this. The subnet is in East US, so you can't cross create. That's why. So if I come here now, because I've chosen both of them in the same region, which is US now, you can see they are there now. So I'm going to do network security group, can do basic, and just let it add all these things to it. Or is it going to create a new one? Public IP address, yes, please use a public IP address as created. Public inbound ports, this should be allowed. Okay. All right. So you see what it's saying here. It's always good to read all these things. It's like hints, like saying the subnet, this is already associated to a security group. This We recommend managing connectivity to the network group via the existing network instead of creating a new one. So that way, I'm not having I don't have to manage a subnet in the VNet level and another in the subnet level and another subnet in the resource level. So that's basically what is happening here. But I'm going to go and just review and create. So it's going to cost me 0.0. Can someone tell me what's happening here? You're running final validation. What's happening here? Validation passed. What happened here? Anybody know?
So
Wow.
we'll start calling names.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to put it on the chat. So next week I'm going to do something, right? I'm going to do something. I'm going to.
Azure policy.
Yes, Azure policy. But next week I'm going to do something, right? What I'm going to do is we are going to do a small quiz, but it's going to be fun one, right? So we just scan it on the phone. We're going to scan it on the phone, and the person that comes up first, what am I going to do for that person? Okay. I'm still trying to remember. So what I'm going to do to that person, I won't say it out when the recording is still on. I'm going to say when the recording is off. Right. So we're creating the VM now. Trying to deploy the resource. After that, to try to connect. Let's see. So, but does anyone have any question? Any question? Anything we're not clear about? All right. So, but what you can do is, Dominic, you can share the link again. Let everybody, if possible. If just go through and rewatch the videos we have already. If you don't understand anything, you can come on Saturday with more questions. Then it will be clear. We'll come down. We'll explain. Right.
So what we'll do next week is to I'll quickly do a recap of this session and then continue for the next slide. Again, before that, if you are having difficulties connecting, creating your Azure, talk to me about it after this session, and then we'll figure something out for you. I'm looking to give out my own account for just practical use for the time being, and then afterwards I can reset the password, or possibly I can give you them JIT, just in time access, for just this session. So after this session, my account will retract back to me. So you will also learn about what is just in time access within in this class as well. So bear in mind, the just in time access is giving you for just this time. If I'm giving you just in time access for a 30-minute or a 1-hour session, after that 1-hour session, when you try to log in or change password or anything, it's going to tell you you don't have access to that account any longer. So you also learn about that as well. So you can continue.
All right, so we've created a VM now. Let me try connecting to it from my IP address. So I'm taking the public IP address. Why? Because it's public, right? And I don't have what's called a VPN connection to it, so I'm going to connect through the public IP address. So I'm going to look for Mac terminal here just to do SSH terminal. All right, so terminal comes up. I'm going to do SSH Azure admin. I believe that's the user I chose. The public IP address. Is it too small, too tiny?
No, they can zoom it.
Okay. All right.
You can zoom. You can use the plus sign from your Teams, and you can zoom and see.
right? I'm going to put the public IP address. I'm going to try to connect. See, it's asking me to accept the fingerprint, and I can do yes. Asking me to enter password. Let's see when I still remember the password, right? Oh, finally, I remember the password. I'm able to connect. So if I can clear screen and can see this VM, this is actually the server we created. Remember, this server is called AZ104. The username is Azure admin. So I'll successfully connect to this VM. I want you to try it from your end. See whether you can get prompts. So if you have a terminal, you have PuTTY. I'm going to put the public IP address here. Let me see. And do SSH. SSH. Just do SSH. Azure admin. I'm typing it on the Teams chat. See whether you get a prompt. So what I'm trying to show, I'm trying to see what that. I'm trying to show you guys what the NSG is doing there. NSG is allowed only for me to come in from my own IP address, right? That's what I'm trying to show people here. Can anyone connect or no?
Okay, let me connect to my okay.
Yeah, you can connect. Just share this error you're getting there.
My terminal is coming up. So if you are looking to install terminal on your Windows, Microsoft made it more easier. You can have Linux distro terminal on your Windows, so you can use that to log into so many virtual machines if you like. So just in case you need help with that, I can also help you. My terminal is still coming up, please. 1 second.
Okay. Well, what we're going to see is not going to be able to connect because only my public IP address is connected. So I think this is a good place to start. We've been going on for almost 2 hours now. So any questions, guys? Any questions? Anything you would like to see more? You can drop it on the chat or you can drop it on our WhatsApp group. And I say see you guys next week if you don't have any questions. All right, remember this week is going to be this week. It's going to be Saturday, 6 p.m. Nigerian time, 7 p.m. 6 p.m. Nigerian time, GMT +1. So I think WIN is going to change for us for next week. From upper week, it's going to be the same time. We're going to be the same time with Nigeria. So yeah, fun. Lots of fun. All right, thank you all. Do have a lovely week.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Thank
you, sir.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bro, try to share the recording sessions for them to also join.
Yeah.